Εμείς θα πάρουμε το κόμμα.
Σαν τους χιώτες και κάτι άλλο, ξέρεις. Λοιπόν, ορίστε, παρακαλούμε. Ολοκληρώσαμε, αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, φωτογραφίες.
Λοιπόν, ας ξεκινήσουμε σιγά-σιγά.
Καλημέρα, να είστε καλά.
Good morning, good morning. First of all, thank you very much for honoring us to be here today to moderate this panel and to introduce the secretary. It is a very important conference because it deals with SMEs, the backbone of the economy, and their transition to the digital era, and the instruments available by the state and the EU to help these businesses transition into this new era. In a very difficult environment, globalized environment, with the difficulties we experience in our country, and with everything we've experienced. Mr. Karathanasopoulos, we had a TV link with them from SMEs in Thessaly, where they suffered a great disaster. Immediately afterwards, we'll have a very interesting discussion for the transition into a green environment and the economic environment. So before that, we have pleasure and we have some Kasselakis with us, a candidate for the presidency of SYRIZA. It's his first TV appearance. The first time he appeared on TV in Greece was when he was a candidate for during the general elections on our show, actually. The presidents had a thought of inviting Mr. Kasselakis, so I would like to introduce him. And I think it's the first time you will be discussing SMEs, Mr. Kasselakis, and we are looking forward to hearing your views and positions. We'll call you to the floor to get your views on this. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you very much for this invitation. Indeed, I'm very, very happy to be here because it is a sector, it is an industry, it is an area that I have experienced myself. Entrepreneurship has changed my life and has created excellent relations with all the employees with whom I had the opportunity to build my career, and I know what inclusive development means and cooperation between employers and employees. Undoubtedly, here in Greece, we have a long way to cover in order to reach the point we need. Presidents of the Athens Chamber of Tradesmen and the Hellenic Confederation of Professionals, Craftsmen and Merchants. Dear speakers, dear participants to this exceptionally important conference. Well, usually in conference, excluding pre-election conference, everybody praises everyone, and after the end of any proceedings, any valuable conclusions, usually there are numerous conclusions. So all these valuable conclusions end up where? Well, they end up at some drawer in some state desk somewhere. Those who know the learning issues raise them honestly, and those who manage the political situations offer promises and then offer solutions that are ultimately not being implemented. I think it's high time we change that. The role of a sincere politician is to become part of the solution and to be daring and imaginative in promoting the request of those generating wealth through proper practices that work in other areas or that are being applied for the first time, breaking new ground. Conference organizers allow me to say that in Greece today, the one that you represent, they only have obligations and no rights. You work 12 to 14 hours a day, more than 350 days a year, with the mobile phones on all the time, day and night. You know that. I've experienced that myself. You generate 50% of Greece's GDP, and you have access to just 2 to 4% of the economy's funds. This is unfair, and this must change. Recently, I saw an article by Mr. Kasselakis in the newspaper entitled "The SMEs at the Shooting Range." Exactly as I feel. Exactly as everyone feels, everyone who has something to do with entrepreneurship. A few days ago, the Prime Minister from the Thessaloniki International Fair made several announcements. He did not, however, announce a single intervention for SMEs, the backbone of our economy. Not one intervention. It's like SMEs do not exist in his mind, or as if SMEs have all their problems solved, as if no intervention is needed for SMEs. I know the huge problems that SMEs experience. I know that energy prices and raw material prices have skyrocketed precisely because these industries are controlled by the very few who keep the prices high. I know that Greece has become the kingdom of Europe's cartels, and this is a result of the policies of the government and the complete lack of any substantial controls. I know that consumers' available income is reduced and the turnover in the market is reduced, and as a result many businesses are in trouble. I know that the vast majority of SMEs are excluded from bank loans, bank financing. This is a reality with which the current government has not only compromised with, but it contributes to the situation. I know that the issue of the debts of SMEs and freelance professionals is an exceptionally serious issue, and all the arrangements that the Mitsotakis government has done so far have the exclusive objective of leading debtors to bankruptcy. I know that the government is interested in channeling the IRF funds to just a few strong and powerful companies. I know all this. And you know all this. Maybe you've heard that I am you've heard me refer to the Greek dream and the right of everyone to experience a Greek dream here.
Το όνειρο να γίνει μεγάλη. Δεν το έχει αυτό το όνειρο, μια μικρή επιχείρηση. Στη δική μου σκέψη, κάθε μικρή επιχείρηση έχει δικαίωμα σε ίσες ευκαιρίες για να γίνει μεγάλη. Δυστυχώς, τα ολιγοπόλια, οι τράπεζες, οι διαχρονικές ιδιοληψίες, οι κρατικές ατολμίες υπονομεύουν το δικό σας ελληνικό όνειρο. Το υπονομεύουν. Και για να μπορέσουμε να το σταματήσουμε αυτό, πρέπει να θεσπίσουμε κανόνες. Την προσεχή πενταετία, η Ελλάδα θα διαχειριστεί περισσότερα από 60 δισεκατομμύρια ευρώ, όπως πολύ καλά γνωρίζετε. Και ο σημερινός σχεδιασμός έχει θέσει στο περιθώριο τις μικρές επιχειρήσεις, αναπαράγοντας παθογένειες για άλλη μια φορά χωρίς θεραπεία. Είμαστε αλήθεια έτοιμοι να προωθήσουμε την ολοκληρωτική αναδιάρθρωση των δυνατών χαρτοφυλακίων επαγγελματιών, εμπόρων και βιοτεχνών? Όχι με ανεφάρμοστες αποφάσεις, αλλά στην πράξη. Με μελέτες βιωσιμότητας, ειδική ποσόστοση, κρατικά εγγυημένης πρόσβασης στις χρηματοδοτήσεις των τραπεζών. Για όλες τις επιχειρήσεις που προωθούν την καινοτομία ή και παράγουν υψηλή προστιθέμενη αξία σε κρίσιμους τομείς της οικονομίας. Είμαστε έτοιμοι να προσεγγίσουμε ολιστικά το πρόβλημα των χρεών προς το δημόσιο και στα ασφαλιστικά ταμεία, με γενναίες διαγραφές χρεών χωρίς αστερίσκους και μια ολοκληρωτική άρση των κατασχέσεων των επαγγελματικών λογαριασμών για τα ποσά που αφορούν στην επιχειρηματική λειτουργία. Είμαστε έτοιμοι να διασυνδέσουμε τις σχολές πληροφορικής των δημόσιων πανεπιστημίων και τα τμήματα διοίκησης επιχειρήσεων, δημιουργώντας συμπράξεις μεταφοράς δωρεάν τεχνολογίας και ψηφιακής εργαλειοθήκης στις μικρές επιχειρήσεις. Είμαστε έτοιμοι να προχωρήσουμε στην διασύνδεση των ελληνικών μικρών επιχειρήσεων με μεγάλες επιχειρήσεις του εξωτερικού που προμηθεύουν το κράτος. Είμαστε έτοιμοι γι' αυτό, ώστε να μπορέσουμε να δημιουργήσουμε θέσεις εργασίας και να αυξηθεί το μερίδιο κέρδους των πιο σκληρά εργαζόμενων Ελλήνων. Φίλοι και φίλες, σύντομα θα είμαστε. Προσωπικά σας κοιτώ στα μάτια και σας λέω ότι το πολιτικό και το οικονομικό κατεστημένο της χώρας σύντομα, πολύ σύντομα, θα αναγκαστούν να αλλάξουν. Θα αναγκαστούν να αλλάξουν και εμείς θα βρούμε χώρο για να κάνετε πραγματικότητα το δικό σας ελληνικό όνειρο. Τι να τους κάνετε τους πολιτικούς, εάν λειτουργούν ως εντολοδόκοι των μεγάλων που σας στέλνουν μικρούς? Τι να τους κάνετε? Εγώ ταπεινά σας λέω ότι είμαι στην σωστή πλευρά της ιστορίας. Τη δικιά σας, τη δική μου. Έχω περάσει τα ίδια με εσάς και τα κατάφερα. Τα κατάφερα. Σε ένα κράτος δικαίου. Αλλά τα κατάφερα. Όποιος παράγει υγιή πλούτο είναι ο σύμμαχος του εργαζόμενου. Και αντιστρόφως. Όποιος παράγει υγιή πλούτο, επαναλαμβάνω, είναι ο σύμμαχος του εργαζόμενου. Και αντιστρόφως. Εύχομαι κάθε επιτυχία στις εργασίες του συνεδρίου σας και να ξέρετε ότι όταν λάβω τα πορίσματά σας, δεν θα τα βάλω στο σιρτάρι, θα τα βάλω σε εφαρμογή και θα είμαι δίπλα σας. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ τον κύριο Κασελάκη. Σε 5 λεπτά θα ξεκινήσουμε και τη συζήτηση στο πάνελ.
Λοιπόν, παρακαλώ, ας καθίσουμε.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let us kindly take our seats so we can resume. Unfortunately, the break took a bit longer. So, many nice pictures have been taken, but there are more serious issues to deal with. Therefore, let us resume. Let us meet the distinguished guests of our panel. So, Mr. Andreas Brigger, Sustainable Development Policy Director of SME United. Good morning, Mr. Brigger. Thank you very much for being here. Mrs. Lina Konstantinopoulou, Policy Director of Eurochambers. Thank you for being here, Madam. Mr. Charalambos Malamatenios, Head of Division for Energy Policy and Planning, Center for Renewable Energy Sources and Saving. And Mr. Ioannis Mitiliagas, President of the Chamber of Trade and Industry of Kozani. So, I believe we are ready. We have many participants. So, Mr. Brigger, you will be the one to take the floor.
So, good morning, and thank you for the invitation and giving me the opportunity to present challenges and opportunities for SMEs in the green transition. Before I start, a little remark on yesterday. I measure my work on a European level for SME United, not in the nice texts and speeches I do, but in the added value our work has for our members. And yesterday brought very interesting insights onto your work when it comes to the access to finance, for example. So that is very valuable to me also, the exchanges I have with you in the pauses, over drinks, to enrich my work and get the Greek perspective integrated. So, to start with, at the beginning of her mandate, Commission President von der Leyen presented the Green Deal as Europe's man on the moon moment. That's big words, huh? But she referred, of course, to the challenge, the scale of the challenge. So looking at decarbonization and digitalization, we are seeing maybe the biggest change and transformation in our societies since the first industrial revolution. And, you know, Elon Musk can certainly afford a ticket to the moon. But what about our SMEs? You probably cannot read this timeline of Green Deal legislation. And that's actually the point. There's been a lot of legislation. I think 79 pieces of legislation have been announced since 2019. Roughly 50% of those have been adopted. The other ones are still in discussion, and some are still to be presented by the Commission. Many of these legislation have direct impact on SMEs, may it be on energy efficiency, renewable energy targets, or energy efficiency of buildings. So let's look at what SMEs in Europe are already doing. Here's a recent Eurobarometer survey that shows a vast majority of SMEs have also, already been taking actions to be more resource efficient. And the proportion of SMEs who didn't had reduced during the last 4 years. The most common measures SMEs are taking are saving energy, minimizing waste, sustainable product design, recycling, reuse, and saving water. But let's focus on the energy transition for now. A recent SME survey found that most SMEs are willing to take measures towards clean energy if the right incentives are in place. Here are the results for Greece of this study. You can see that installing solar panels, building insulation, and smart energy use are high on the agenda, provided there's the right incentives and support measures. The results of the studies, which is an NGO study, by the way, confirms our members' experience. As you all know, rising energy costs created a severe challenge for our SMEs' survival and growth. Too often, they encounter a bureaucratic overload and lack vital support, and we have heard lots about that yesterday. For SMEs, it is crucial to get technical assistance, clear technology-neutral solutions, and support to get their energy bills down. SMEs must not be left behind if we want to make the Green Deal a success story for all. Here's a best practice example and a little advertisement for what we're doing at the European level. The Covenant of Companies for Climate and Energy is a pilot initiative by the European Commission to encourage and support European companies, and particular SMEs, to step up their contribution to a clean energy transition and climate action. As SME United, we're one of the project partners and try to engage our members on the ground to participate in that project. This project, the Covenant, helps or aims to help businesses decarbonize by encouraging energy efficiency, renewable and other measures. Businesses can make a pledge with the Covenant, whereby they commit to taking action to reduce their carbon emissions. Companies will receive practical, step-by-step guidance and technical assistance to help them take concrete actions. They will also save on their energy bills and get recognition for their efforts. Right now, the second call for this project is still open, and I really encourage you as entrepreneurs to apply for this program and profit from this program, because it's taxpayers' money, we spend on that, and it should go back to you. So clean energy is an important element of the transition, but climate change adaptation is another, and we also heard lots about this. And I want to take a quick example at the tourism and hospitality industry. So tourism is a key driver of Southern European economies, Greece included, I believe. This summer, temperatures were sizzling all across Europe with intense and prolonged periods of heat in Greece, in Italy, in Spain, but also in Poland or in Germany, with air temperatures facing up to 48 degrees. And we heard lots about the fires in Greece yesterday and the floods. These extreme weather conditions have a severe impact on the European and Greece economy. Unfortunately, those conditions are bound to stay. That's the bad news, because we have already crossed several planetary boundaries, and crossing those tipping points means that we cannot mitigate all the effects anymore, but need to adapt. So here's a recent No, that's not the one. Here's a recent Twitter incident from Germany. The German Minister for Health spent his summer vacation in Italy, and the following tweet caused major diplomatic tensions. He said, "The heat wave is spectacular here. If it continues like this, these holiday destinations will have no future in the long term. Climate change is destroying Southern Europe," he said. "An era is coming to the end." As you can imagine, the Italian tourism minister was not amused by that. So now, is that era coming to an end, or is it just the beginning of a new era? And it's a fact that the tourism industry will face considerable stress due to climate change, and coastal regions will be the most effective. We can expect that northern regions will benefit from this change in terms of tourism demand, and southern regions might face decline. And that peak pattern would even be more pronounced in higher global warming scenarios. But what does that mean in practice? The tourism industry in the Mediterranean countries must adapt to climate change. I think we could all agree on that. Here's a quote from the Greek tourism minister from a year ago. He said, "No German, I'm German, no German will ever freeze in Greece." And of course, he refers to a different seasonal distribution of tourism demand, with relative reductions in the summer and increases in the shoulder and winter season. And that's one of the examples of adaptation. We could also look at other sectors, productivity in the construction sector, for example. We could look at sustainability and the investment needed for enterprises to go into that, and of course, agriculture. And climate change adaptation will have to play an increasingly significant role if we want to keep up our businesses' competitiveness and stay on the sustainable growth path. I'm a big fan of economical perspectives, of non-action and action. Can we put a price tag on non-action? Despite ongoing adaptation and mitigation efforts, economic losses from weather and climate-related extremes in the European Union reached over €500 billion between 1980 and 2021, and only a quarter of those had been covered by insurances. Greece actually recorded the highest climate-related losses of any country in the European Union, and we can expect that economic losses will increase significantly as global warming advances. The costs will depend on the global warming scenario, but in any way, a lack of adaptation is costly. But action has a price tag too. To achieve the ambition set by the European Commission, there are significant investment needs. The Commission has estimated that achieving the current 2030 climate and energy goals will require 260 billion of additional annual investment. That's about 1.5% of GDP. So mitigation is costly too. And this might seem worrying to entrepreneurs, and it certainly is, and it is challenging. However, the good news is the costs of inaction exceed the costs of action. And our Covenant project actually confirms this finding. So adaptation, actions and investment in green energy are cost efficient in the long run. Taking action, that's what we found in the project, can increase profits and reduce the environmental impacts at the same time. So coming back to our ticket to the moon, I would like to finish with 5 policy recommendations to make the green transition fit and affordable for SMEs. That might be easier in some European countries, as we heard. In Greece, it might be difficult for finance issues. So just very quickly, we have to scale up those support measures, like in the Covenant of Companies. Then we have to make sure SMEs have access to resources, notably renewable energy and recycled materials at affordable costs. SMEs must have an enabling legal framework and legal certainty to be able to join that journey. And most important, probably, we have to make life easier for SMEs by reducing bureaucratic barriers and bureaucratic overloads. And as we heard many times yesterday, we have to facilitate access to finance for SMEs to be able to afford the ticket for the green transition journey. With these conditions in place, I believe small businesses can have a big impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brigger. I was shocked by certain data that I came across. I was really shocked by certain costs that you need to take into account, and you need to take all such things into account in order to find funding. What Mr. Brigger described is a future where we will go to swim in Copenhagen, most likely in the future, given that the Mediterranean will be hit by very high temperatures.
Good morning, my name is Lina Konstantinopoulou. I'm Policy Director at Eurochambers. Before I start, I would like to thank the Hellenic Confederation of Professionals, Craftsmen and Merchants and the Athens Chamber of Tradesmen for inviting me. Eurochambers is the largest Brussels-based organization that represents more than 43 national chamber of commerce networks. It has a network of 1,700 regional and local chambers and has more than 120 employees. Mr. Kasselakis spoke of the backbone of the economy. I would like to say that the chambers are the backbone of the economy. And my intervention today will focus on the impact of the European Green Deal, the way we see it in Brussels and as we speak with the European partners, the Council, the Parliament, and that. I will make my intervention in English to join Andrea so that he doesn't feel by himself.
Okay. Celia. This is the last term of the President of the European Commission, Ms. von der Leyen, with a continuous policy objectives, despite the global pandemic, and of course the war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, the supply chain disruptions, and also all the financial crisis that was before that. Now, the EU Green Deal has set out a very challenging target. We are aiming for net zero in 2050. This is a very challenging target, and we are already now thinking about how to make the green transition possible. Our membership is talking about business confidence that is even lower than in 2008 when we had our financial crisis. We are still experiencing issues of affordable access to energy and raw materials, and of course, skill shortages. Now, SMEs are facing quite a lot of challenges, and I will just name four. The first one is about regulatory burden, γραφειοκρατία. Number two, competition from other continents, την Αμερική και την Κίνα, Europe and China. And third, it's about sustainable finance and also skills. So with respect to the regulatory burden, Andreas also pointed out we will have under the EU Green Deal something like 79 EU regulations. So what is exactly is meaning? So the EU Green Deal will increase the responsibility for all the EU businesses to be transparent on how they produce goods and how they communicate this into their consumers. So these new regulations are imposing a lot of sustainability reporting requirements, and of course, these new regulations about human labor. So there are EU regulations that are pointing out on what exactly is the skill force that is going to produce your goods, especially if you are importing from China. And it's also about due diligence. So it's also about non-financial reporting requirements. So we are talking about a great threat. It's an opportunity, but it's also a great threat to European companies because they will have to do double heavy reporting for all these different types of EU regulations. The second very important element is competition. We are facing quite a lot of fierceful competition from the US and China. There are two very important legislations that are currently into force. The US Inflation Reduction Act and now the Chinese energy subsidies. We are facing quite a lot of competition in climate. So we are changing our global geopolitical context. We're having new friends that didn't exist before. We have new enemies that we didn't thought that they were there. So now we need to think about how can we tackle climate protection. Climate protection also commonly, but also ensuring that we can calculate these numbers in a common way. The third very important topic is about finance. How we will calculate this. Now, the European Green Deal is talking about investments for businesses, 620 billion to invest yearly. So this is a huge amount of money if we are thinking that the EU economy by itself needs to invest in this sustainable transformation. How can we do it? Well, I think the first thing is that we need a different type of banking system, a banking system that is fragile and agile. Agile in meaning that we need more sustainable loans for SMEs. We need a different state subsidy also for the SMEs. And above all, we need one way of reporting our bureaucracy costs. We cannot have 79 EU regulations, and an SME will need to produce bureaucracy costs in every different types of EU legislation. That's not possible. And finally, it's about green skills. So tell me about how we have to equip our new staff with training, with programs, and university is not enough. The university is not enough to equip this new sustainable transformation. That's why chambers are the most important players with respect to training on the skill force, but also ensuring that there are advisory programs on circular economy, on energy efficiency. But what is also very important is about the Recovery and Resilience Funding, το Ταμείο Ανάκαμψης, το Ευρωπαϊκό. It's very important that we must ensure that it's absorbed. We are facing now with our members that it's not used. The Recovery and Resilience Funding is not used. We need to make sure that it's used completely, not at the national level, but at the regional and local level. So the SMEs on the ground can use this funding to be able to ensure the sustainable transformation. And I'm going to just finalize my speech by saying that we really need to consider the European legislation. The national legislation is, of course, only transposed, and we need to make sure that we have a voice and the voice of businesses, and we are very glad to have our member, την Κεντρική Ένωση Επιμελητηρίων Ελλάδας, που είναι μέλη μας και μας δίνουν αρκετές πληροφορίες για την κατάσταση.
They are our member and give us a lot of information about the situation in Greece. Thank you very much.
Ας τα κρατήσουμε όλα αυτά που μας...
Let's consider everything you're saying. You said 620 billion, huh? Huge figures. Now, we'll now leave the floor to Mr. Haralambos Malamategios, Head of Division for Energy Policy and Planning of the Center for Renewable Energy Sources and Saving, the so-called KAPE in Greece. You have the floor, sir.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ και εγώ με τη σειρά μου.
Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in your European conference, which is very topical, very to the point, because we are indeed witnessing an era that needs action for energy transition. For SMEs, as well, which, as we have been hearing, indeed constitute the very backbone of our economies and play a very important role in global economies. I need to say that for SMEs, energy consumption, though it is relatively low at the level of the firm, it is high if we approach it globally, and the International Agency of Energy said that SMEs represent 13% of the global energy consumption, trillions of joules, 1/3 of the energy consumption of the industry and services. On the other hand, there is a huge opportunity, a huge possibility. 30% of energy consumption could be saved if the necessary, the appropriate technologies are applied. Therefore, actions to improve energy consumption lead to energy saving, and this leads to a positive impact on the economy and to a series of benefits: the reduction of waste, the reduction of water consumption, the reduction of CO2 gases, and an improvement of working conditions. We need to underline here that apart from energy, we also assess the environmental footprint of firms and SMEs in particular. And when talking about very small businesses, which is 6.2% of the totality of firms in Greece, well, they are responsible for 15% of CO2 emissions in Greece. And it is clear, therefore, that energy cost influences significantly entrepreneurship, especially for companies that operate in high energy intensity products and services, and therefore this is a major concern, and it is imperative to find sustainable solutions that will be able to guarantee financial stability and sustainability for the firms, for the businesses. So we need solutions. This is the only way to reduce energy costs and to protect the environment. Let us now talk about a series of obstacles that have appeared according to a recent study. There is a lack of specialization, there is a lack of time, and there is a lack of resources from SMEs, and there is a lack with a specific and adjusted policy. And this is an issue. Very often there are no controls and there are no measures taken to correct certain things. Then there is a difficulty in approaching SMEs because they are very varied, and there is a lack of information about the investment opportunities that exist for SMEs. In any case, the reasons why SMEs don't invest is cost mainly. This is the general framework, but these are also the objectives of the energy transition and climate neutrality. These have been depicted in our national plan for the climate, which we submitted to the European Union. And there is yet another plan that is under review right now, envisaging even stricter rules. So we have very old infrastructure, very old edifices. There is an issue of competitiveness and productivity. There is a very high energy cost. There is a very low level of awareness, of information about energy-saving issues, and there is a lack of targeted projects to improve energy efficiency in Greece. And these are some proposals that have derived from this LEAP for SME study. So we need that. We believe that we need to increase the awareness through targeted campaigns for SMEs, talking about the cost of energy and the impact, positive impact of reducing energy, rather of saving energy. Then we need to facilitate access of SMEs to funding, and this is something that many of you have touched upon, many of the participants and the speakers have touched upon, so I won't dwell on that. And there is a program called Exikonomo Epihiro, which is a program in Greece that aims at improving energy efficiency of micro, small and SMEs in Greece, and there are some other mechanisms and measures of the market that could be utilized in order to improve the energy efficiency of SMEs. And here are some of those. We need to promote the concept, the idea of energy controls, which are obligatory for big firms and which are optional for SMEs for now, but we need such energy controls because they help us understand the characteristics of the energy consumption of an edifice, of an industrial activity, of a facility in general, and of the system of transportation and so on and so forth, and help us come to certain conclusions and certain measures of energy saving measures in order to help firms and SMEs apply such measures to improve their energy efficiency. Another proposal is to promote innovative support mechanisms for SMEs. For example, SMEs should be aware of the ESCOs, which are companies of energy services, and approach them to find out what they can offer them. Then there are some other tools, market tools, such as voluntary covenants or agreements, which need to be linked with specific subsidies and grants. Voluntary agreements comprise an action plan for industries of high energy intensity and a general action plan for businesses that do not have an action plan for their fields. So all these agreements could be linked with grants and subsidies by the state. Then there is another tool that has to do with the prioritization of the regimes, of the imposition, of the obligation of energy efficacy. Such regimes have to do with distributors of energy and retail energy firms that are retailers that sell energy, which need to achieve a cumulative objective of energy saving. And this is a very important tool to take into account. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Πρόεδρος του Επιμελητηρίου Κοζάνης, θα τον καλέσουμε στο βήμα. Καλημέρα. Ελάτε. Κύριε Μητλιάγκα.
We'll give the floor now to Mr. Yannis Mitliagas. The organizers, Mr. Kavathas, Mr. Hadjitheodosiou, dear speakers and participants, Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be invited to talk at this conference, and this conference will serve as a compass for the future of small enterprises in the country in a changing economic environment. I'd like to convey the climate from the heart of green transition, Western Macedonia. But let's start with the big picture. Climate change is one of the largest threats for the 21st century, given that it negatively impacts all economic activity, and already in industry and in manufacturing we've seen disruptions in the raw material distribution networks and a high energy cost. At European level and under the European Green Deal, we have the new European adaptation strategy and the climate law for more rapid adaptation and acceleration of the actions to halt all these impacts. Our country, as we see, is affected by intense weather phenomena which are expected to worsen in the future, and the Bank of Greece estimates that long-term the impact on the country's GDP might be up to 6% unless specific measures are adopted to adapt and mitigate the climate change. In this direction, the private sector must integrate adaptation actions within a new financing framework where the lending cost will become higher and higher, and also will have to support innovative solutions that will improve resilience and competitiveness of the production process. Specifically for Western Macedonia, the Fair Development Transition Program enables local entrepreneurs to implement actions and projects that will reduce the carbon footprint at local level and at the same time enhance the competitiveness of local SMEs and the attractiveness of investments for the entire Western Macedonia region. Voting the Climate Act 4966 of 2022 enacts a series of obligations for enterprises, including the following: horizontal reduction of GHG emissions by 30% at least by 2030 compared to 2019. This provision concerns almost all the economic activity. It has to do with environmental infrastructure projects, tourist buildings, livestock breeding, fish farmings, and only activities under the rights allowance systems are excluded from the provisions of this law. The obligations also include the submission of an annual report on the carbon footprint by small and large businesses in specific sectors starting from year 2024. In practice, this means that the obligation to submit an annual carbon footprint report will gradually be an obligation for smaller businesses, and we see this trend, and this will probably be linked with the lending rates, the possibility to participate in R&D projects, and the amount of state aid that SMEs will be eligible for. But apart from the legally binding obligations, recording and evaluating the carbon footprint and mostly certification of the process offers a set of advantages for businesses. It is the documenting the energy savings capabilities, the measurable reduction of production costs from the application of energy saving practices, providing information to stakeholders, acquiring an eco-label for each product, improving the company's profile, and promoting the so-called corporate social responsibility, and the penetration into a new market with increase of exports to countries that have consumers that are very aware on more strict environmental regulations such as the UK and the US. entrepreneurs need to understand that in a highly competitive international market, certification gives a competitive edge, and it's not the certification of the quality of the product. This is something that is taken for granted today. But now the certification that will be required is the environmental certification. So green transition is a continuous and very painful process which for small enterprises that we represent is included in the following concepts, which are the main requirements for achieving the objective, which is nothing else than then becoming greener. The first concept is the business decision, namely management understanding that they have to apply a set of actions regarding a greener company, making the company greener. The second concept has to do with human resources, and the training of human resources is very important to perform upskilling and reskilling of the manpower of the business. The third concept has to do with enacting and using instruments for making a company greener. This requires specific policies. A key obstacle for making small businesses greener is the usually wrong perception that the small companies can't do anything or should not be part of an overall national effort. The mistake in this approach is that the key national objective is not disseminated and does not go through the entire society, the entire business world, thus losing the overall greening culture. Fourth and last concept is the regional or cross-regional dimension of applied policies, since through these policies stress and highlight the diversity and cohesion between business industries and between various geographic areas. These four concepts make up the environment wherein an SME has to grow, taking up the share that it is entitled to in the national effort for a greener and more sustainable national economy. But the greatest problem, as the previous speaker said, is possibly financing, and say the combination between bank financing and support programs for small enterprises, because according to market leaders, great players in energy, green transition has a considerable cost. It's a cost that small businesses cannot carry, because the flow of capital for their everyday operation combined with the capital required for the greening efforts make it very difficult to follow on this double path, namely deal with the increased operating cost and at the same time make investments that have to do with their development towards a green and sustainable transition. We believe that entrepreneurs can understand the changes that have to take place in the upcoming period. The key points for economy and for our region. I'm going to give you a more regional picture, since I represent a regional chamber for Western Macedonia. So we set the following points for interventions. First, participation in collective schemes in order to for the virtual net metering. Right now there is an issue for electricity space, since the necessary investments have to take place. Do not allow businesses and citizens to reach that. The rational management of waste to achieve circular economy, from cooking oil to batteries. The change of the fleets renewal of equipment infrastructure, and of course the in-house business training that I mentioned earlier. For all these interventions, all this intervention require regional and national policies, and on a regional level, let me say that the Kozani Chamber, with its 100 years of presence in the business reality of one specific region, right now is a leader in a set of actions with environmental character. We participate in the fair development transition programs by training 500 unemployed persons, and we train them in green economy. We have submitted a financing proposal for adaptation of the Kozani businesses to the requiremts of sustainable entrepreneurship with the University of Western Macedonia and a class of bioeconomy environment that aim at shaping the conditions for the proper shaping the right conditions within the enterprises of the region to improve their environmental footprint and their environmental compliance. And we support first-level associations and groups in actions promoting green economy. And the main one is the initiative to support such associations and groups in organizing seminars to train workshop staff that integrate technical and technological developments in electrical mobility. That's the news from a small regional chamber. And I would like to conclude with our great objective, which is none other than securing access to financing of more green investments, claiming a local guarantee transition fund which will ensure the timely and unimpeded implementation of the investments that both the country and our local regions requires. Our region, we stand together. We managed to create TADIM, which is the Western Macedonia Development Fund, which is a portfolio fund which managed to provide microfinancing to 900 businesses across the entire Western Macedonia. This fund must be supported and by the government with funds and new actions and responsibilities in order to finance especially small businesses in the implementation of the Fair Development Transition Program. Our message is just one: small is beautiful. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ τον κύριο Μητυλιάκα.
We thank you very, very much. We thank Mr. Mitiliagas very, very much. Now we can ask some questions if so wished. We would like to ask questions, but you, the audience, may also take the floor and pose questions. If there are no questions from the audience, we'd like to ask Mrs. Konstantinopoulou, the regulatory and legal framework of the European Union. Well, does it help, and how does it help SMEs to achieve green transition? The President of the European Commission will publish next month one of the biggest European regulatory frameworks for the rationalization of the requirements of data submission of 25%, meaning to say that this will be a way to help SMEs reduce red tape and also reduce the legislative burden. Andreas earlier said that under the Green Deal, there are 79 legislations. Well, there are 300 more that will come until the end of the mandate, the current mandate of the European Commission. This is a fever, a legislation fever. And those of us who work in Brussels keep hearing that the next crisis that we will be faced with after the pandemic, after the Ukraine war, the crisis we will be faced with is the bureaucracy crisis, the red tape crisis. And what do we as chambers try to do is the following. With the help of big chambers, like the Chamber of Germany, of France, but also the Chamber of Greece, we try to provide solutions and find ways to try to understand which are the legislations that we can maybe change and say stop these legislations, or help us find a less bureaucratic framework for SMEs. We have sent a letter to Mrs. von der Leyen. I mean, there are 20 legislations in the Green Deal which we want to eliminate. I think that the bureaucracy in Brussels is an institution, unfortunately. It has been established as an institution. But SMEs can't deal with such a burden. They need a horizontal approach. So, this is a problem to tackle horizontally, yes. For the 600 remaining legislations that are pending before the mandate of Mrs. von der Leyen is completed. Mr. Berger, how do you support your members for them to achieve this transition and for them to adjust to the new energy environment? Can you give us examples of the ways you use?
First of all, as SMA United, we monitor the policy developments. We try to understand the policy development, and we try to sort of translate it to the realities of our members. And considering the amount of legislation, that is challenging. And there's not only the Green Deal, like designed from 2019, we had the war in Ukraine with the energy price crisis, and it was certainly very challenging for people like me to follow the legislation and the ever-growing amount of emergency measures there are. So that was challenging not only for SMEs on the ground, but also for SME organizations. So this is one of the things we're doing. Of course, we ask our members for good and bad practice examples from their national realities to feed them back to decision makers in Europe. And we try to engage in these projects that I mentioned, not because we love to invest time in projects, because we hope this can be an added value for members. It's sometimes very challenging to get from the European level to the national level to the regional level, but this is something that we need to intensify and have this dialogue so that in Brussels we don't work in a bubble, but we open up the bubble for our members. And lots of members don't have an office in Brussels, so they're dependent on our services, and I hope they get added value for the money they pay for our membership.
One more question, kindly. We have been talking about green transition for years. Is there an estimate about time? Is there a timeline, a timetable? When will we be able to say that we have achieved green transition?
I mean, there have been goals set by the European Commission, there have been goals set in different member states. Some of them have the capacity to advance faster. For example, notably Germany, they have in some areas have an earlier phase down of coal, for example. Things are possible if we invest the right amount of money and if we empower businesses to do that. And that's what we always say at European level. You need to really have targeted measures that benefit the people, but that also benefit the backbone of our economies, which are SMEs. So making sure that the money does not always flow to the big industry players, but to SMEs is paramount. And when I was talking to some colleagues here, I heard that that is not the case with installing solar panels, for example, in Greece. That is not the case with access to finance. And I can give you an example on access to finance from the European level. There's lots of funds. There's a jungle of funds, to be honest. And there's a fund called the Innovation Fund, which administers money from the emission trading system. I'm in an expert group on that, and we organized a workshop for our members on small-scale project, and that was all very interesting, and members were very interested, up to the point where they described the application procedure. And then everybody was, I don't think we had an application from one of our members for this fund. So just having funds available doesn't mean that's a good idea, and that doesn't mean that it reach SMEs. We have to make those funds accessible.
Thank you very much. Ουσιαστικά πρέπει να ακολουθήσουν όλοι αυτή την πορεία.
Let us proceed with Mr. Malamateños. I believe that this is a question everybody has. Mr. Mitiliagas said that entrepreneurs need to adjust. I would like to ask you if you believe that the actions present so far for energy saving suffice, or if you think that we can do more. No, such actions do not suffice. We need to do more. In my presentation, I tried to deliver certain messages. This year, in 2023, there has been a program addressing SMEs for the first time, and to help them take measures for their greening procedure. There are some moves here and there and some actions, but they do not suffice, unfortunately. We need more actions, and we need to introduce the institution of energy controls. This is the first step that we need to take if we want to save energy. And the $1 million or euros question, are there opportunities in the energy sector that can be taken by SMEs? I said earlier, rather I spoke about certain proposals that could be taken into account and that could be assessed by the state. But can SMEs find solutions on their own? What do you think? Well, they need to fully understand their situation, and they need to submit themselves to an energy control. This is the beginning. This is the first step to take, especially for industries. And I told you that it is obligatory for industries. But anyway, then there are more possibilities. Yet another possibility that I haven't mentioned, but Mr. Mitiliagas spoke about it, is the energy communities. And not just the energy communities, but also some new institutions, some alternatives, such as the communities of renewable energy or the communities of active citizens that will start appearing gradually. And I believe that this is a source for SMEs. They can integrate themselves into such communities, and they will have benefits to draw from. Or they may initiate something like that. But is there a legal framework for that? Yes. And what do SMEs need to do? They need to start searching about such communities. Okay, Mr. Mitiliagas, there is a green transition in your area, the biggest green transition in your area. Mr. Brigger said that all SMEs should follow the path. We shouldn't have different velocities, different speeds. Do SMEs follow? There are 3 speeds. We have the big players who have integrated all necessary processes in their internal operation. Then we have some medium-sized entities, some SMEs, which are trying to achieve the mix of bank leverage and investments in infrastructure and so on and so forth in order to save energy. And then there is a third speed. The vast majority of the businesses which need guidance and which need support so that all such tools, like Mr. Stamatellos said, with the energy communities and so on and so forth, so that all such tools become part of their policies and that they have access to such tools in order to have an indirect greening process by participating in such communities. And can chambers play a role in that? Yes, they can play a very important role, because together with the local government, they need to take all such businesses and SMEs by the hand and help them shape their path forward, and they need to join forces and create collective synergies that will have an impact. So they need guidance. Yes, they need guidance. This is the role of the chambers, and this is a role they are already playing. And chambers, they need to increase their speed and integrate themselves these new conditions and the new possibilities from the legislation, and they need to be more helpful and useful for their members. In our area, there is a lot of awareness in this field. Both citizens and businessmen, entrepreneurs rather, are aware, rather they are, and they need to know the steps to take. And we've spoken about bureaucracy, we've spoken about the obstacles in the access to funding. And what obstacles do you have in your area? Kozani, up in the north of Greece, is a very hot example right now. There is a central planning, and there is a lot of money committed to certain things. But what needs to change is that we need to have a bottom-up approach, so that specialization and the speed necessary to do certain things should start from the local government, the chambers, in a bottom-up approach, and then the central government should follow. Okay, thank you very much. We thank the speakers of the panel, and there will be some time now for questions from the audience.
Το όνομά σας, την ιδιότητά σας.
Καλημέρα, Βαγγέλης Αγγελάκης.
Good morning, Vaggelis Aggelakis. I'm Deputy President of GSEVEE. Thank you very much for your presence here today. It's about the energy, it's a situation for energy communities that we need to look at a different viewpoint for small enterprises. The large companies that have taken up a huge amount of space, if not 100%, do not allow small enterprises. We, as a federation at Trikala, we tried to create energy communities with some associations in collaboration with the municipality. For example, the Association of Bakeries has great energy costs, and we could have an energy community. The response was that there is no network to absorb it. Let me read something, that there was an effort to have a municipal council at the municipality of Trikala, and it was postponed, where they submitted an application for a huge photovoltaic park of 400 megawatts in 90 pieces of land, taking up more than 6 acres. What are we to suggest? Why Well, some colleagues or some businessmen want when we want to create a small energy community, there was no available grid, whereas for the photovoltaic, the huge photovoltaic investment, there was immediately grid available. Another question. Good afternoon. My name is Giorgos Kasselakis. I'm chairman of the Traders Association in Nea Smyrni. Given the severity of the issue we're discussing, green transition, I heard that the Exikonomo program has a subsidy of 35%. Knowing other programs that were suitable for our companies, where there was a subsidy of 40, 50, 60, even 70%, and taking the opportunity to have Ms. Konstantopoulou here from the Commission, would it be possible to channel more funds so as to increase these subsidy amount more than 40%, so that the SMEs could use it in order to realize our own projects and our own energy transition? It would be good if Ms. Konstantopoulou was at the Commission, but she's not at the Commission, but we would like to have a response. These are actually national legislative framework, and I don't think they are relevant with the European. Because Exikonomo is a national program, is not a European program, is not an EU program. So you need a local intervention for that. It's not a European program, so we can't have a European. Yes, if there could be, if they strengthen more funds from the Commission. Well, municipalities usually have development companies, enterprises. I think it's very important now to take up the opportunity now that it's an election period. I think the best you could do was talk about European funds like InvestEU, etc., that could help. And there are many European financed programs, InvestEU, SME program. There are various funds available there that you could look into to leverage. But you're going to need to have a development company in Nea Smyrni. As far as I remember, there's no development company in Nea Smyrni. I'm just giving you an idea. She's just showing you the path. Mr. Malagnatengi, I would like to ask to a comment for the photovoltaics. Although I'm not responsible, but from technical point of view, I would say, and playing the devil's advocate here, that we should not confuse things. So it's one thing to have a solar park of 10, 15 megawatts, and it's different, completely different thing, the small solar panels that we install on our house and equally installed by energy communities. The community systems are connected to the distribution grid, namely to the HEDNO, the distribution operator, whereas the big projects are connected to the electricity network operator. So it's a technical aspect, yeah. It's a technical point, but when somebody wants to invest in solar and they tell them there's no available grid and, there's a big investment and suddenly the grid is there and it's available, something has to change obviously there. Yeah, that's a point of policy. Unfortunately, the comment made by the gentleman is off the microphone. We cannot hear what he's saying. So they're trying to find space for their energy community. And it's logical because this issue has not been explained. My name is Vardos, a member of GSEVEE. I wanted to make just a small intervention in terms of this. We're all talking about, a green transition. So there's a There's a big hype about solar and wind. We see solar everywhere, and I'm not hearing about any policies of how we're going to treat with that. You know, everything has a life cycle. You know, a solar panel has a 20-year lifespan. Then it will have to be replaced. What's going to happen after that? What's going to happen 20 years later? Will the solar parks become solar cemeteries? What's going to happen? I don't see any policies to ensure their long-term operation. Well, contrary, there are specific operation frameworks, but what happens at the end of their life cycle? What's going to happen with this equipment? You know, I think from what I'm reading, we have started the discussion of recycling. The first was the discussion of recycling of wind generators, and now we're talking about, we've started the process discussing the solar panel recycling. And I could give you, for example, in Crete, I'm from Crete, so there were applications for 100, 200, 300 kilowatt of solars. They gave licenses for 80, and then they gave some license by priority. Or these solar panels that have some trackers, once the contract is over, the kilowatt-hour price will be such that they will not be affordable. They will not be able to meet their costs. So every businessman that has created a park, they're just going to abandon it. So this is going to be, we're going to have trash, solar panel trash everywhere. Now, before we conclude, the question you said to Mr. Mitliagas, what role the chambers can play. The chambers can play a leading role in green transition and in informing businesses. What is foremost, however, is to support, to enhance chambers with scientists, with experts, to get the information and convey that information, disseminate that information. And it's an opportunity now that we're all here together to remind you that under the SYRIZA government, the last of the SYRIZA government, the Central Union of Chambers with Mr. Michalos, the then chairman, and we've signed a memorandum of understanding with the ministry. We had ensured 15 million to finance the structures at the chambers, 4 scientists for every chambers, paid for 3 years, paid up for 3 years and with no cost for the chambers. And in the course of time, these experts which would have been absorbed by the chambers, their payroll would be covered by the offsetting services provided by the chambers. I think that all chambers and the Central Union of Chambers is something that we should bring to the surface again with a new Minister of Development, Mr. Strekas, and indeed these resources, these funds need to be found because chambers, specifically the regional funds, I'm not talking about Mr. Hadjiadosiou, he can afford it under 10 experts, but the regional experts with their limited finances cannot participate to the extent they should participate in this national effort. Thank you. Yes, this has been enacted. Yes, yes. You're eating up your own time because immediately after this panel that we will conclude now, we're going to have another panel with Mr. Hadjiadosiou, with Mr. Haas, with Mr. Karanikas and Mr. Ravanis, because now we're going to have a few minute breaks and we're going to have half an hour coffee break with Mr. Karathanasopoulos, and then we have the final panel. Definitely will be here. Thank you very much. We thank all the guests and the panelists. Thank you very much, and thank you all.
Ο κύριος Kasselakis ήταν σύντομος, έμαθα, έτσι, σας είπε τα νέα, έμαθα και τι σας είπε. Εδώ θα κάνω μια παρατήρηση.
I'm going to make a very brief comment. I have covered many events for SMEs. I would like to say something on the occasion of what Mr. Kasselakis said, because we always learn what your guests are saying. It's all very nice and easy to say that we want SMEs to go ahead, that we need to help them, that we need to stand by them. We've heard them many, many times. The point is having a design, having the SMEs sit down with governments and opposition parties, because on the 23 years that I've been covering this aspect of the entrepreneurship, the SMEs, the small entrepreneurs, are not asked about their future. Others are deciding about their future, and at some point measures for entrepreneurship are announced. Reduce the contribution, yes, let's reduce it. Reduce taxation, yes, let's reduce it. But when it's time for the bottom line, and nobody puts their hands in their pockets. We're stingy. I'm saying this on the occasion of the Resilience Fund, because it leaves out SMEs, and because most SMEs, I mean you, have more than 80% of employment in Greece, you should be the first to be asked. But we're not seeing this happen. The second thing I want to say is that a theoretical presentation, speech, anyone can come here. You say it much better than our politicians, that we must do this, we must do that, but that's not how things are done. I'm saying this based on what I've seen so far and bits of what you've experienced firsthand. First thing, energy. What were the subsidies that the SMEs received on energy bills? Well, almost nothing. How did SMEs benefit from programs? How many? Who? Why? We have the tax advance, you don't even know if you're going to be in business next year. Well, these are things that should be said again and again. I see that my colleagues from newspapers and TV have come here and they cover the news, and I would like to go ahead and give the floor to Mr. Nikos Karathanasopoulos. He is an MP, a representative of the Communist Party of Greece, and I would be very happy to hear him and say what he has to say about SMEs. And then we go to the presidents, Mr. Kavafas from GSEVEE, Mr. Hatziadodosiou from the Chamber, Mr. Karanikas from the Commerce, and Mr. Ravanis from Athens Chamber of Small and Medium-Sized Industries. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the organizers, GSEVEE and the Chamber, for extending this invitation to the Communist Party of Greece to attend and greet this conference. Of course, I don't know if Mr. Rogakos insinuated that I should be brief, since he said that Mr. Kasselakis was brief. I will try not to tire you. Of course, the only one thing is certain is that what I'm going to say is things that you have not heard in these 2 days. Other times, of course, in the past, things will have been heard before. Why am I saying this? Because we approach the issues from a different viewpoint, and we want to approach them more looking at the dark side of the moon and not the bright part of the moon. And I'm saying this because the overwhelming majority of the people, of workers, of self-employed, of professionals, of tradesmen, in general, the popular strata live under fear and concern of what's going to happen tomorrow, because they can't survive, because they have debt after debt, because they have to deal with a cyclone of problems and from a series of unfavorable incidents resulting from natural disasters and the consequences, which of course are not planned. This conference takes place just a few days after the horrible destruction caused by the wildfires and the floods at the Thessaly farmland. And why every time it rained are there floods? Why every time there's a fire then there's such devastating consequences? Isn't it possible to limit even this extreme weather phenomena? You know, technology, scientists can't create such an environment that would limit this huge repercussion. We believe that there is. Otherwise, we would be feeling sorry for ourselves and seek help from some higher deity, or we would just blame ourselves or the God. But things are not so. Because, for example, the professionals in Thessaly who now experience the horrible consequences of that destruction. Isn't this related to a situation that has further aggravated their position? We had the 10-year-long crisis and the memorandum that put a lot of burden on the backs of professionals, of tradesmen, various problems. We had the Ianos storm in the same region. We had the pandemics, and now we have the new destruction. All this chain shapes a very unfavorable environment for professionals. Let me just restrict myself to professionals, to self-employed, what is the focus, the core of your conference, the very, very small micro businesses. Isn't it because they had a hostile state vis-à-vis their position, who did not ensure to safeguard their property and their lives from extreme weather events? What about the future, which is unfavorable for them? Isn't this the result of strategic choices? In essence, the various restoration measures do not suffice to cover the losses because there are various limitations. Only 70% or only 70% will be indemnified, compensated, not 100%. If somebody has tools and machinery for more than 10 years old, are considered depreciated and are not compensated, and you're going to have to buy new ones, not compensated by the state, apart from the fact that we're going to have 2, 3, or 4 years to give any compensations, and the professionals will be living in an environment of difficulty. All the more so when debts are there, despite any suspension that will be afforded to paying the debts, or at the same time the revenue is uncertain for the upcoming 1, 2, or 3 years, and no measures are stipulated for any compensation for the loss of income, because the professionals are not in Thessaly are not in a vacuum. When the destroyed farmers and workers and other people living there, how will they be able to have a turnover there? I'm saying this because in this condition that they exist today, we need to strengthen this movement with the federations of professionals and tradesmen in Thessaly that seek specific measures to address the distractions and full compensation of the consequences of this destruction. Well, one might ask, this is a conference on entrepreneurship, on the new challenges ahead in the new era of green and digital transition, and the Social Communist Party of Greece starts an intervention from the destruction in Thessaly. And why do we do this? Because we want to showcase who are the true responsible people for the problems experienced by the vast majority of professional freelance materials, of micro businesses, this 80% that leads to the dark side of the moon, in our opinion. And what are these issues? What are the opponents? The first opponent is that there is a hostile state against these people, a hostile state which is selectively unable to protect the lives and property of the people, and at the same time selectively very able to support the interests of large groups, the monopolies, to create infrastructures that serve their own interests and their profitability, and for that very reason, and the motto that was heard after the crime in Tempe is their profit or our lives. And this hostile state deals the same way the human needs, the needs of the people, and this is what the Marxists are calling the class discrimination of the state. And all these professionals have a lifelong, suffer a lifelong, time-long hostile policy of the European Union. Even though some parties want to present the European Union as a saint. Let's get an example on only the financing packages. Why does it create these financing packages, the NSRFs, the partnership agreements, the recovery, resilience funds, etc.? Why do they do that? The EU prepares that in order to finance its strategic options. What are the strategic options for the European Union? It is to safeguard the European Union multinationals in their tough competition with multinational groups of other large economies. And in this sense, it tries to shape the right conditions, create the infrastructure, the financial packages to support their investment projects. And this is the result of the integration of the European Union, the inter-European network, so that multinationals can transfer their services, their imports of their products without cost. So and other measures to improve the competitiveness and their position in the global capitalist economy. So the strategic choices of the European Union finance these programs. That's why there are limits. The first limit is eligibility. Whatever is not part of the concept and the philosophy of the European Union is cut out, is left out, it's not financed. And the second is the second restriction, which is the financial reciprocity. If an infrastructure that will be made will create multiple benefits, not only for the economy where it is built, but overall for the European economy. What does that mean? This is the cost-benefit concept. So if an infrastructure does not create more favorable conditions for the action of monopoly enterprises and groups, if it does not create the condition to increase the fiscal revenues of the state and the European Union at the same time, then this project, then this infrastructure will not be financed because it conflicts with the cost-benefit analysis. So we see billions of euros, a party with billions of euros, and from this party of billions of euros, the vast majority of professionals, of craftsmen, of tradesmen is excluded. Is what the people's it's that there's nothing available for these people, and they are excluded because they are not part of the strategic options of the European Union, of the civil states. And if at some point they finance these people, the broader popular strata, they do it in order to purchase the consciences, in order to be able to be there, to be supported by the popular strata and not only by the political and financial parts. And the third cause is that there is the time-long hostile policy of all the governments from any viewpoint when we see it, even despite the fact that all the governments always speak of the backbone of the economy, the professionals, the SMEs, whether these parties are in the government or in the opposition. You know, they say kind words, big words, but when they are called upon to implement something or even as opposition to support the policies, they always support the policies options that serve the interests of the few and not of the many. For example, taxation. Huge tax rates between the various levels of entrepreneurship, if I don't like these terms, the various levels of entrepreneurship. There are here sectors of the economy where there is almost zero taxation, by option of the state, and there are other sectors that need to pay 80% of their tax for the next year. There are sectors of the economy or businesses that can have legal tax release and others that do not have any tax release, tax exemption at all. I'm saying this because the tax system is unfair. It is for the benefit of the few and to the detriment of the many. And this is always to the detriment of the workers, the pensioners and the professionals, despite the fact that they are trying for many years to create hostility on the basis of community, so that one social stratum turning against another social stratum, not affecting the great party that is taking place to their detriment. And they target specific groups. With the firm memorandum, they have targeted the professionals for tax evasion. Then they targeted public servants, civil servants, because they said they were lazy. There are always tax evasion in society, and civil servants that do not live up to their standards, and then they targeted the private sector employees because they have higher salaries than the rest of the economy. This effort taking place wants to cover up that some sections are always not targeted. So I'm saying this because there's a new cycle of tax invasion against you, and at the same time there are new incentives given to large groups. Is there tax evasion? Of course there's tax evasion, but let's make a separation, if you'll allow me. And the separation is this: the tax evasion that's taking place for enrichment, for that various big bosses going about with Cayenne and having yachts and helicopters, and there's tax evasion that people are making it in order to be able to survive. I don't think we can have the same category. A person who's selling burgers, and out of 10 burgers he does not issue a receipt for 1 or 2 burgers, and the same is for a big shark that does tax evasion to a higher degree. We need to give incentives to the small merchantmen so that they can survive without tax evasion. For the financing, and there's numerous other issues. What did Mr. Tournaras, the BOG governor, yesterday? He said something that was very true. Who can be financed by the European programs or the banks? The companies that have a dynamism, the companies that have investment plans, the companies that can grow. What about the rest? The rest who struggle for day in, day out for their wages? No, they can't be financed, because this financing is not just to survive, it's to ensure the dynamism of the economy. So the fact that there's an 80% will be precluded, as it was always the case. It was always excluded from the various financing, either of the banking system. The banking system did not become predatory now. It was predatory 20 or 30 years ago. So in this viewpoint, we are clear, saying that all these wonderful words that we hear in every conference organized, in every event, in every election period, regarding the backbone of the economy, regarding using the term entrepreneurship that is trying to cover up the various interests that are there. This is an effort of conscientious deceit, we're saying, because what is people that are included in the term of entrepreneurship are people who are trying every day to survive and not to expand their profitability, and they have not only to deal with a hostile state, a hostile EU, a hostile governments, but they also have to face the competition, the harsh competition of large business groups. I wonder, is it the same for clothes tradesmen with big multinationals selling clothes, or do they work under the same terms? No, they do not work under the same terms. All the more so, and the terms will become even worse for them in the upcoming period, because the day after will be a lot harder overall for the people, despite the efforts of the governments and the Prime Minister himself to shape a new government narrative speaking about the achievement of reaching investment grade or the upgrading of the Greek economy as a whole, and for a growth that will give development, a growth dividend to all. This is the other version of the fair growth that SYRIZA and PASOK are claiming. But it is certain that the growth that will come, to the extent that it will come, because if there will be a new crisis, it will be a growth that will be unfair, to the detriment of many and to the benefit of few. Take tourism, for example. As we call it, the heavy industry of Greece. What's the result? We might be breaking one record after the other, but this shows also the limits, the limitations. And what else does it show? It shows that in order to have this tourism miracle, there are unfavorable labor conditions. There are hundreds of thousands small businesses that operate near and around the hotel chains that do not only see an increase in their turnovers, but they are struggling to survive because they get a very small piece of the pie. And there's also the millions of families that cannot take a single day of paid leave because they're not allowed to. That's why we're saying that this growth is unfair because it intensifies social inequalities, namely collection of wealth in fewer and fewer hands, whereas on the opposite it expands the social strata that see their position either in an absolute or relative level to become worse and worse, and creates new impasses because it overturns the balances, and new impasses create new crises. And in this sense, couldn't somebody might add to the discussion saying we have new instruments. Maybe all these phenomena could be addressed with these new instruments to modernize the system, such as the digital transition or the green transition. We're saying, for example, the digital transition will widen the gap even more between the big business groups and the small companies. Let me just give you one example of one side of the lighter side of the digital transition, e-commerce. So the system supporters say one does not need to have a store in Ermou, which is in the main street, which is very example, and have it somewhere else, have an e-store. Now, somebody who has that can have 1,000 SKUs and have big warehouses to be able to compete with the multinationals with the millions of SKUs and huge warehouses. No, so it's easier for those who live in those popular neighborhoods not to go to the main street of the region of their neighborhood, but go online and buy from groups, from multinational groups, to have access to cheaper and lower quality merchandise. So one might ask, okay, the Communist Party of Greece is against new technologies and digital transition. We say no, we need to utilize new technology. New technology is not bad by nature, it's not hostile to the people and to their needs, it's how to use it. So just like the knife, you can use a knife to cut bread and cheese, the knife can at the same time be a murder weapon. That's why we're saying that the consequences of new technology are not new, but they depend on who's using them. The same happens with the green transition. I'm not going to go into greater details. We all know this, have been discussed. The question is, why these options? Why, as the European Union, make these strategic options now? Because it is an ultimate effort to give answers to the impasse of overaccumulation of capital that do not allow the European economy to have high growth rates. And it's this huge overaccumulation of capitals that widens the competitions, the oppositions, the economic wars. And yes, I just have a couple. Yes, you had a fight with your Yadis yesterday. I'll just need 5 minutes. I'll just need 5 minutes to complete. And thank you very much, Mr. Rogakos, for reminding me, although I'm always checking at my watch. So, This commercial and financial war, it's a huge war, especially when it comes to new technology and energy, in rare earths, supply chain and global trade. And especially this financial, commercial and energy wars leads to the imperialist wars that we are experiencing in Ukraine, possibly elsewhere. So in this point of view, we might have a big picture in front of us, which is an uncertain progress of a global economy where the thicker clouds of a new crisis and huge uncertainty, and brings about the inability to manage all this. All the management models have appeared from various governments in our country and elsewhere. It's not a matter of management failures of the various governments, but it's a matter of the nature itself. For example, the expansive monetary policy led to inflation. To respond to inflation, the increased interest rates. The medicine for one disease is a poison for another, so this cannot be brought together. To conclude, Mr. Ogakos and dear participants, we are saying this. Since we are on the dark side of the moon, the professionals, the tradesmen, the freelancers, the small businesses must go hand in hand with workers and the other popular strata and to reach to a rift with the system and in order to survive, because it's not socialism that takes the house from their owners, it's the banks and the business groups that take their homes from the people. So socialism must be, so we need to support the stream of challenges, and we need to include the various targets of the Communist Party of Greece, just like the management of private debt. And unfortunately, we see that the private debt index is rising, and it's not 120 or 200 installments, it's not a medicine, because no matter the number of installments cannot be paid. We need a haircut, a deep haircut, and the bankers need to pay that because they have benefited all these years. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your invitation and for your resilience. I wish you the best. Thank you, Mr. Karathanasopoulos. Now, presidents, come on, have a seat. I don't know if one agrees or does not agree with the views of the Communist Party of Greece. We are always very attentive when they speak, especially Mr. Karathanasopoulos.
Φέρτε το σε μένα. Δώστε το. Είναι για την πράσινη ανάπτυξη αυτό. Βγάλτε μια φωτογραφία. Να είστε καλά, κύριε Καραθανασόπουλε. Καθίστε, θα είναι ενδιαφέρουσα η συζήτηση. Θέλετε να μην κάτσετε εδώ. Καθίστε εδώ, μου κάνετε παρέα. Μην... Και άλλη φορά πιο φαρδιές να είναι πολυθρόνα.
So, let us proceed with our panel. Somebody gave Mr. Kasselakis his tie. There has been an exchange of ties. Just joking, naturally. So, we need to wire you. Yeah, until this happens, let me give you 3 pieces of information. 1, tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, we will have a statue for those who fell in 1927 from the field of shoemaking and plumbers. There was a demonstration of GSEVEE back then for the rents, for the price of rents, which had gone up. So a demonstration took place. It was a very big one, but the military was involved and 3 professionals died. And tomorrow we will be presenting a statue in the memory of these people with the presence of the mayor of Athens, Mr. Bakoyannis. Tomorrow evening there will be a performance at the Herodion with Mozart's Requiem, and this is an initiative undertaken by us. And then next Thursday, 14 businesses operating in the field of clothing will promote a fashion fair at the Zapion Palace here in the heart of Athens. So you're all invited to participate. So, we are touching on the following theme: small enterprises' challenges in a changing economic environment. An environment which will be very difficult and which will become even more complex in the future. Can we really change things under such difficult economic conditions worldwide, and development conditions, the climate change? And your colleagues in Thessaly have been harshly affected. Yes, and next week will bring more adverse weather conditions, and nothing has happened so far to alleviate them. So time is very important. Time is of the essence. Winter is coming, and I have the feeling that the tragedy is not over yet. And with reference to businesses, I think there is a sharp fall of the turnover. And this is an issue that will be deepened, that will continue, and I don't know if businesses will be able to cope, to deal with this challenge. There have been some reliefs, tax reliefs mainly, but the turnover that will be lost is so important that we will need more and more measures and relief measures. So everybody needs to help in order to find the most appropriate solution. I mean, measures are okay, but we need to be able to interpret the daily reality in the best possible way in order to find the right solutions. And there is a problem small businesses of Thessaly are faced with. Retail multinationals, they have more capital sources to draw capital from. The entrepreneur of Thessaly, only have Thessaly to draw resources from. And this is something that we need to take into consideration, because when there are problems, there are no more resources. And this is something that needs to be taken into account in order to avoid further desertification of the periphery of our country. I have heard that many entrepreneurs are considering live in Thessaly. And here we need to show, to extend our solidarity, and the state needs to act. And the most important enemy, the biggest rather enemy, is red tape. So we need to deal with all such issues. Okay, fine, thank you very much. Let us begin our debate now. So, I would like you to tell me what are the challenges of your enterprises. Which do you think are the biggest issues faced by SMEs, and which are the solutions? Because, okay, we can number the problems, but what are you after? What are the solutions that you're seeking? Mr. Ogakos, we live in an economy that is constantly changing, in a never-changing economy. We live in the digital era, and we have to say that only a small number of SMEs in Greece have entered the digital era, not more than 15 or 20%, and very, very soon we will have to deal with AI. And we need to see how SMEs can enter all such domains and be more competitive. When there are big changes, there are problems. When we compare ourselves to Europe, we see a difference. Europe, like us, was faced with the pandemic, the energy crisis, but it didn't have the memoranda. Which means that there has been a long period of time in our country where the GDP went from 245 billion to 165 billion. And this gap, unfortunately, led to many enterprises, and especially SMEs, to bankruptcy. And such enterprises were not able to modernize themselves. Then we had the pandemic, then now we have the energy crisis. So we don't have the tools to do certain things. So if the money the state can give or Europe can give, if they are not given in the right way, then we'll be talking about an economy where SMEs will simply not exist. Mr. Stournaras made an excellent speech yesterday, and I noted the SYRIZA plan, which he mentioned. For those of you who have studied it, I mean, many people say that it would be a very good plan. The contrast between the previous government and the current government, which was it? The previous government fought against entrepreneurship, also in terms of taxation, and actually brought SMEs to their knees. The current government reduced the taxes, but when the time comes to distribute money, it only distributes money to big companies. 12.5 billion has been given only to a few number of businesses from the recovery fund. And what does this mean? That I mean, how is it? It's not possible to take loans like that. When we want to produce a product or provide services, things are complicated. So there is no competitiveness like that. The NSRF, only 6.5% of the businesses have access to NSRF projects. At the end of the day, let the government say how many businesses really entered the recovery fund or the NSRF projects. What the data I am provided cannot be questioned. Then another issue has to do with banks. The interest rate currently is 0.3 for deposits and then 6.8 for funds and grants. And what happens right now? Deposits in our country amount to 189 billion.
and grants are 122 billion. When I spoke about memoranda, I said that we had deposits of 150 billion and grants of 300 billion.
Now we have a surplus of million. We have 77 billion as a surplus. I mean, why am I saying that? 80 billion is the recapitalization of the banks. So we supported the banks, but not the SMEs. So our country has chosen to support the banks, but we want the banks, but not like that. So 2.5 billion the banks received. When the Prime Minister says that this can't go on and that this doesn't change, I mean, we're talking about a different state here. We have to remember, I mean, we're all taxpayers, right? I'm very happy because the government wants to tackle tax evasion. Tax evasion is unfair competition, and we want tax evasion to end, really, and black economy to end. But banks haven't been paying the taxes since 2012. Their tax payment keeps being deferred. Why so? This is not fair. Things need to change. So, in conclusion, what I feel is important is Mr. Rougakos to try to understand what we want about the future. So, under the current circumstances, only 5 businesses control 88% of the foodstuffs domain in our country. They are a monopoly, an oligopoly. The same will soon apply to restaurants and to many other domains. So, we will either support SMEs. Not all SMEs will survive, but we need to try to help them survive. And SMEs have yet another characteristic. 90% of them are family businesses. And many people say that we have many SMEs. It's not really true. 84% in our country, but 92 in Spain and 90-something in Italy. So, why are our SMEs lagging behind? Because of the memoranda. So, it is a matter of policy. It is a matter of political will. How do we want the economy for our future? How do we want it to be? So, we need to safeguard that our SMEs will remain Greek and that we will be able to provide a system that will allow SMEs to be efficient and perform positively. Thank you very much, President. I understand that SMEs do the following. They recycle wealth, they provide a job, the taxpayers pay their taxes, but only few gain the profits, take the gains. I mean, nobody is saying that that industries need to cease to exist. We're not saying such a thing, but we can't really have a situation where 85 out of 100 people constitute the backbone of the Greek economy, but do not enjoy tax benefits or tax relief measures and things like that. And Greece can't function without SMEs. SMEs are a part of the Greek DNA. Mr. Kavathas, in a constantly changing economic environment, since we are entering the fourth industrial revolution, the digital transformation, the green transition, and the AI, without the necessary resources for SMEs, small and micro businesses, and the self-employed, it is certain that some, and actually many, of these businesses will cease to exist in the near future. What we are witnessing in Greece and in Europe I mean, what we are witnessing in Greece is also European to a certain extent. 89% of the businesses in Europe are SMEs, small and micro businesses. They have more than they cover more than 60% of job positions in Europe. Percentages are a bit higher in Greece. They produce 55% approximately of the European GDP. So you do understand that without them, we would have had to invent them. Tajani had said so when he spoke about SMEs in 2007 within the framework of the conference organized by the European Union on SMEs. I think it took place in Prague. So we need to achieve economic democracy in our country, but also in Europe. And what do we mean by that? All businesses should have the equal rights, equal access to funding, equal access to European projects in order to be able to rise to the task and fight under the same conditions. But there is an oxymoron in Greece. In a totality of 800,000 small and micro businesses, only 500,000 businesses, according to public data, can have access to the bank system. And what does this mean? That only 5% of the businesses can have access to the bank system out of 400,000 employers employing staff. 49,000 is just 10%. So we need to provide SMEs and small and micro businesses and self-employed the opportunity to have access to bank loans. And how can we do that? We have been talking about it over the past 2 decades. We need a bank of a targeted bank, a specialized bank like the Development Bank that will earmark funds for SMEs with a specific criteria, different from bank criteria, which exclude the vast majority of such enterprises. Then a second issue is the high operational cost. The GSEVEE Institute shows an explosion of the operational cost up to 40%, and the increases by 52% of the businesses doesn't exceed 15% in their prices. And due to the oligopolies, and this is why I'm talking about financial democracy, political democracy is in danger by dictatorships, and economic democracy is in danger by oligopolies. So this is what is happening in our country, and we see that with the increases of prices for products that are, it's not justified, like olive oil. 1 liter costs 10.45 euros, 11.50 euros, 16 euros. So what kind of oil do we sell? We sell the oil of last year, which was sold at 6 euros. Is there a lack of oil, olive oil in our country, in Europe? Yes, we have reduced the production in Italy. So there is a lot of demand about it, but the industry has oil that it bought with 6 euros and it sells it at a much higher price. So there is no need to increase the price for certain products. Then flour, cereals, why is the price higher? What kind of cereal are they selling? The ones of last year or the previous year. So some rises in prices are not necessary. And this proves the absence of the Committee of Competition, of the European Committee of Competition. So yeah,
On the other hand, there is a third point, and I will conclude with that, is the private debt. We have settled the public debt, which is huge. I mean, it is settled by until 2030, but private debt hasn't been settled. It keeps growing day by day. We had an increase of insurance payments that is quite high in the first semester of 2023. When someone can't pay his or her obligations, when people keep accumulating debts that receive surcharges, I mean, the state will never be able to receive such money. So there are so many outstanding payments that need to be paid by taxpayers, insurance payments. There are so many debtors out there, such a huge private debt. Piraiki Patraiki, for example, which went bankrupt which closed in the 80s, they still owe money to the state. Anyway, the private debt is kept high, but there is no need to do such a thing. We need to clear the registry of due payments.
The banks have been recapitalized 4 times thanks to the money of the taxpayers. Why? Because we needed to save them. Because in a capitalist world, economy only exists with banks. Are our banks Greek? No, they are not Greek, the 4 systemic banks. And what do they do now? The Prime Minister asks the banks to reduce their commissions, to change their policies vis-à-vis loan receivers, takers. And Mr. Hadjitheodosiou said, I wouldn't ask for the deferred tax that had to be paid by the banks, that has to be paid since 2012, but I could tell the bank, well, as of the 1st of January 2023, you need to pay your taxes. And from now on, you need to pay your taxes constantly.
Meres Ravanis. Craft industry, there's years that we haven't seen investments in craft industry. There's no longer craft industry. In northern Greece, President, you know what was happening. Northern Greece was filled with craft industry, SMEs that made products and they were well priced, etc. We see now that it is a very precarious condition in Greece, and the challenges lie ahead, of course, Mr. President. Good morning. I'd like to thank the Athens Chamber of Tradesmen and GSEVEE for inviting me here and for organizing this European conference for the challenges of small enterprises. And we were looking forward to the conclusions, and I believe that the conclusions will help pressure the governments for the problems of small enterprises. Let me make a comment to what you said earlier. I've said on numerous occasions, and my interlocutors here understand this better, and all the trades union men that are here. We know that when a party is at the opposition party, they agree with us on the problem and the solutions, and when this party becomes a governance, they do not agree to see us and solve our problems. So, I think this is happening. I've been 18 years president of the chamber and 32 in chambers overall. This is the same situation ever. The opposition agrees with that, the government does not agree, so does not try to resolve our problems. Now, moving on to the craft industry problems. After the war, many people became craftsmen out of need. There were problems, we had the civil war, you saw that many large businessmen are part of progressive areas, so they became entrepreneurs by need. We saw, however, the development of craft industry until the 90s. Then after 90s, we had export businesses, which meant that Greeks were entrepreneurship, they could have production. And then we reached 2012, we saw that after 1974 we lost some large-scale businesses, but when we saw the big problems was when we had the global liberalization and when there were very cheap products manufactured in China and third countries. Then that was the death of the Greek craft industry. Some survived in northern Greece where there was cheaper labor or what have you. Nevertheless, a large part of craft industry was resilient. It was resilient because it changed the mentality of production. What I'm always saying is that each era has a different way of different production methods. At some point we produced because we had a need to have production. We needed, for example, consumer goods. People needed the consumer goods, we produced it. At some point there was an oversupply of products, so there was no longer a need, but you had to meet the needs to provide services. So while in essence we were producers, we had the production, but there were other needs that had to be met. For example, in the past, we had 10 shirts. We didn't need 11 shirts, but we bought the 11 shirts because we followed the trend, the color, the design, etc. The same was happening with food. We used to eat desserts, full flavor desserts. Then there was light desserts and stevia desserts, etc. So when there was something different, and the producers, changed their methods and adapted their business opportunities. So the solution to craft industry is innovation, create new products, follow the trends, follow the fashions, and have smaller production units. We do not have the capacity to have products that can be launched globally. We can have products that are channeled in specific markets in Europe, and very rarely, very few enterprises that go beyond the European market and operate globally. As regards the state, President, what kind of assistance and support does craft industry need? We heard that one of the problems is financing. You don't have access to banking products. So all the more so craft industry, because as you know, craft industry is a labor-intensive sector and a capital-intensive sector. If you don't have a capital to purchase machinery, it's very difficult. That's why there are many colleagues, and I heard earlier someone saying, imagine somebody in Thessaly right now. We all know that 10-year-old, 15-year-old machinery is almost new. But if the machinery is more than 10 years old, they will not be compensated because the machinery has been depreciated. This is tragic. You know that the subsidies given are very low. They do not look at the business plan. That's the problem. In Greece, we have the problem that one files a business plan. They do not look at the business plan. They look if they have some sort of collateral, a house or something, in order to offer it as security for the loan, instead of looking at the business plan and take the risk of whether this business plan will be successful or not. So the banks, instead of taking a certain risk by financing the businesses, the productive businesses, the banks only want to have full security. That's why many craft industrialists and professionals owe a lot of money, and I heard George was saying about loans. They owe a lot of things to the banks because the environment was completely different. The environment changed, and this change was not easy. It was not easy for these companies to change, and that's why many people are at risk of losing their homes or other property. I'd like to add one thing. We should take a look at the second chance. If we really want to help, we want to see what's going to happen with the second chance. Many people cannot pay the cost. Unless we give them a second chance, then there won't going to be a possibility to overcome the problem. Thank you, President. Mr. Karanikas, what is there to say? What is there to say about commerce? I agree, and since we have the presidents here, the organizers, would like to thank them for the invitation and congratulate them, because these sorts of initiatives are very important in our efforts for something that's self-evident, that small entrepreneurship is necessary. It is a necessary part of the entrepreneurship ecosystem. We can't have it any other way, despite the efforts of the system to limit them, to restrict them in various ways, which we will analyze in a little while. Now, as regards the figures that we heard before, had by Mr. Hadjivassiliou and Mr. Kavathas, and we'll agree with all the figures, because these are figures that are come from various bodies or the European Union or other agencies or the Banking Association. The part that can be attributed to commerce is 225,000 small enterprises in our country that operate in commerce. And it's important, this is important. And commerce has 16.5% of employment, and and it's the first point of entry in the labor market for many people, because until now our sector required very few skills. Now with the transformation requires a bit higher skills. I'm going to get into that in a little while. Now, what are the barriers of small entrepreneurship? The first barrier comes from the Pisaridis report. It says that it is a structural barrier for growth. What does that mean? I don't understand what it means. So at the end of the day, what we're looking for, isn't it the growth of the country, the growth and prosperity of us all? So this is a wrong approach. But this was used as a weapon. We have the RRF with huge amounts of money that are not channeled to small businesses. It's a loan, yes, clearly, but as it has been designed, it concerned large-scale businesses, so a very large part of entrepreneurship is left out of the RRF. The NSRF, the partnership agreement, supposedly that's for small enterprises, and in view of the digital transformation and green transition, we see barriers. One barrier is that the enterprise should employ at least 3 people. Why? Why is this case? This is not introduced as a term by the European Union. If the European Union has introduced this term, we need to tell them that our country is different. There are very many small enterprises that do not have 3 employees. Are they kicked out of NSRF because they don't have 3 employees? And so far, for the digital transformation, as we can understand, what has been given to small and medium-sized entrepreneurship is a 900 euro voucher. But this is peanuts. So what kind of digital transformation are we talking about? And Mr. Kavathas mentioned a term that we need to be very careful: economic democracy. We need the economic democracy must apply in all segments of entrepreneurship, because that is going to be possible to control competition. If we can't make it in the market, and a small business surprises, we have a small enterprise that survives, we're trying to choke them off and try to do anything. We have to support them. Our country, entrepreneurship, needs everyone. It needs large businesses, it needs large investment, but it needs everyone. So if we have economic democracy terms, then we're going to have fair and sound competition, which in terms of commerce, we're going to see results in combating high prices. High prices cannot be combated with allowances and benefits. High prices are combated only through fair and sound competition. That's when we're going to take significant steps forward, because consumers will have many options and not just focus on some points and have accumulation, and not have accumulation. And after that, it's logical that we can't control the prices. We said that 20 years ago. Again, we had the same thing. The Competition Commission had intervened and stopped this. Again, now we see the same concentration in the past 2 years. We've seen a 2-digit percentage. We have inflation, a 2-digit inflation in foodstuff, and it is a very important element that we need to combat, but in cooperation with consumers. We need to take consumers into account. Consumers need to trust us, and everybody needs to believe us that this has to happen together and to their benefits, because we are consumers as well. We too are citizens of the country. We are consumers, and this is of interest to us. And when prices are not high, this will be to the benefit of all. There's a common effort, and the consumers and citizens need to understand how important the support of SMEs is, how we should try to do anything to support SMEs, not do any favors, but we heard that some would fail. Yes, I agree, that's how a market works, but it is the state is obliged to provide economic democracy and be equal towards all. If it does so, Greek tradesmen are intelligent, they're very agile, so they have low costs, so they can respond to that, and something to link us with the craft industry. And I've repeated this on numerous occasions. If you see the markets, the supermarkets in our country, where there's great concentration, 4 or 5 supermarkets, Greek feta, there are no more than 10 brands of Greek feta you're not going to find. But there are more than 500 operating in feta production. Where are they going to challenge the products? In the small businesses, in small shops. That's where we can find the greatest variety. So I repeat, the key obligation of the state is not how to destroy small enterprises, not how to provide only extensions when needed. And don't forget the memoranda, the energy crisis, the pandemic, all these affected small entrepreneurship. We spoke of Thessaly a little while ago. And it is a debt, it is our obligation to help preserve the small entrepreneurship. And we don't know how, we need to find out how. And we need to find out ourselves. And we have a key responsibility, because I'm not shying away from our responsibilities. We, the organizations, the bodies, the representative bodies, because we haven't found a way to support small and medium-sized enterprises, and why we need to protect them. It is the key link of Greek economy, a key factor of progress, and it is a key link of social cohesion. And it is the future, the road to the future. Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to say one thing. I was discussing with a minister from a productive minister. He said, "What are you saying? Why are you saying?" And we're hearing about financing RRF, the small and medium-sized enterprises. But don't you understand that if the big guys get the money, they help the small ones and the SMEs, because they're going to give business to SMEs? That's what the minister told me. And I said, "I'm sorry, that's the first I hear of it." Well, listen to it. That's why we give the money there, because they will roll the money over to the smaller businesses and to SMEs and to create new jobs. What's your reply to this?
This debate started in England with the narrative that you just presented, but the scientists of the specific university came to the conclusion that this is not what's going to happen, that by giving the money to a big business, then a chain would be created. That's not true. But so we have an accumulation of profit, unfortunately. The system didn't succeed, unfortunately. But Mr. Karathanasopoulos said something important earlier. I believe that many times, people always ask about certain things. They want regulations. They say they want regulations, they want changes in the recovery fund and so on and so forth. But this is what we say. We want to be treated in an equal manner. 84 billion are owed by businesses, and 400 million are owned by SMEs. So it's not, the SMEs that owe more money to the state.
Μπορείς να πάρεις εσύ χρήματα από το Ταμείο Ανάκαμψης και ένας ο οποίος χρεοκόπησε πριν 3 χρόνια.
Many, unfortunately, firms have gone bankrupt. The recovery fund, Europe didn't say how to distribute the money. It's the decision of the Greek government to act in a specific way. The Greek government could have set certain ceilings. Europe didn't say this is what we oblige you to do. So it's the state that decides certain policies, and the state could have supported many more people. We don't want people who won't give money to receive money. It's nice to get money, but then give the money. This is what should happen. Belgium is a more advanced country than Greece, but Belgium saw the bankruptcy of 15,000 businesses, and in Greece 350 businesses. This is an oxymoron. So, going bankrupt is not such a bad thing. Trump has gone bankrupt twice, but the system gave him the opportunity to start again, to start over again. So, going bankrupt is not a bad thing if you have the opportunity to start again. Now, the NSRF, if the NSRF is not offered as a tool, some people say that many people have access to the NSRF. That's not true. That's not true. How many SMEs have access to the NSRF? And the logic is the same, 60%, if we want to be honest. The bank system says to the 60%, you're over. 60% is rejected because 60% owes money. So if you owe money, you have no hope, you're hopeless, you're excluded. But what about the remaining 25%? 15% couldn't get money because there were no guarantees, and then the rest of the percentage couldn't get money because their projects, the master plans, the plans were rejected anyway. It depends on what you want. Do you want as a state to have SMEs or not? If you want to have SMEs, you have to support them. GSEVEE studies prove very specific things. There is a report by the Competition Commission which warned actually about the phenomena that we are currently faced with. And we're talking about an independent commission or committee. And right now, we keep hearing about speculation. What is the answer? Send people to jail. But, I mean, speculation doesn't happen in the same way. I mean, the grocery store doesn't speculate the way big businesses speculate. So, Mrs. Zaga said something about petrol or olive oil. You can't really buy things at €6 and sell them at 12, for example. So, let us stop pretending. People who speculate have a name and a surname. So we need to tell names to let everybody know who does so. We want our consumers to be able to buy things, to buy goods and services. And then the payroll, the wages. Politicians keep saying, I will give you that, and I will give you that. But we want European wages for our country, decent wages. Because people, the salaried are our clients. Let me remind you the 3 memoranda taxes. Loans entail high interest rates. So we asked the government to increase the wages and to provide tax reliefs. I'm not going to talk more, but let me answer your question. Common sense can understand that we want economic democracy and we want to be treated in an equal manner. The way we pay, in the same way we want to receive money. We want to have access to funds. The fund is called Recovery and Resilience Funds. So this is what we are asking for. The self-evident. We are asking what is self-evident. Okay. I believe that a priori the state believes, thinks that you are a kind of thieves. The state a priori feels and believes that the money that it will give you, you will not treat it properly. But this is the mistake. Without controls, you can't really blame people and accuse them of being thieves. There need to be controls and specific clauses. I mean, you can't really say that I'm not going to give money to the SMEs because they're not going to treat them properly, to treat it properly. And then what about second chances? There need to be second chances. We're talking about an ever-changing economic milieu. I mean, we've had difficulties until 2018, but even now things are difficult. There are more difficulties every year. The war in Ukraine, energy issues. So the state is not an ally. It is an enemy, an opponent.
Τι σου είπε ο Υπουργός?
Ότι τα δίνουμε στο...
What did the minister say? The minister said that we'll give them to the big guys so that they can give them. Well, this reminds me of my mother. When we were having dinner, then she would shake off the tablecloth and so that the little birds can also feast on the breadcrumbs. The last thing you said is something that's very dear to me about the tax system. Nikos, you are You are a journalist. You've been a journalist for many years. The country has a tax legislation that's more than 25,000 pages long, and this is a problem by itself. Why does the system do that? Why does the state do that? Well, they do that because this way a small business that does not have an organized accounting office inside the business, adapting the changes taking place takes a long time, and this leads to unavoidable infringements. The second is that the state never showed that they trust citizens or professionals. As a parent, I'm saying that to gain my children's trust, I trusted them. Now, if the parent is the state, trust me so that I can trust you. When you are always threatening me with a guillotine above my head for the previous 10 years, and you're threatening me with a tax audit for 10 years, how am I going to become a compliant taxpayer? I said to Mr. Hatzidakis recently when he took up the Ministry of Finance, we are entering a new era. We have a My Data tax system. We have the link of POS with the cash register when this will be achieved, but we are entering a new era. And therefore, could we possibly close all past years without having the fear of tax audits have the fear of this, because these audits are a threat. For every year there could be an extra tax. Let's do away with the past. Let's start afresh, a new era with low tax rates. In the previous term of the current government, it reduced the tax rates. We have to be honest. From 22% to 9% for privately owned business is something that's very positive, but this needs to have, we need to have a progressive nature in the tax rate. So the more one gains, the more they should participate, the more tax they should pay, and follow what the Constitution says according to their ability. So let's stop with that. Let's finish with all that. Let's find financing. Let's find the financing instruments that can reach the small and medium-sized enterprises, and then let's raise a question. If the Pissarides report is applied, the Pissarides report talks about restricting the number of self-employed and small enterprises, and increase salaried employees. Let me ask you what. Tell me one great iconic investment taking place in the country today. The Hellenikon projects. How many jobs will the Hellenikon create in a 10-year phase where it's full? It will create 75,000 new jobs. Now, if 100,000 companies are helped to get one employee, to hire one, we're going to have 100,000 new jobs overnight, not in 10 years. That's why a small business, thanks to its flexibility and agility, is the greatest employer. Now, there's another question now. Why, say I'm the state, why should I finance why should I fund craft industry which is on its way out? Why lose my money? What do you answer to that? What we're saying is this. If we want to help and support something, first of all, I disagree that craft industry is on its way out. Well, I'm playing the devil's advocate. We see that we already have increased exports. Where does this come from? It comes from our products, the craft industry products, whatever this may be. Therefore, I believe that if there was a different way to support craft industry, I'm saying that if the banks actually read our business plan and not try to find security or collateral in order to get the loan, then things would be considerably better for craft industry. We're seeing recently, especially the Greek craft industrialists, the ones that were left because there have been great losses. The chamber until 2006 had 65 to 70,000 members. Today it doesn't have more than 35,000 members, and unfortunately a large part of our membership was from production. We see that there are fewer businesses, but they are resilient. Recently we're seeing, and this is another positive thing, that in the past 2 years there's a change, and we see that we have double entries than exits, and this is positive. But we see that the exits are small and medium-sized enterprises, and the ones that open are small and micro companies in service provision mostly. Now, in the absolute capitalist state, the United States, when there is a major project, I'm talking about engineering projects, they have the various degrees, you know, the various grades. They are ranked, they're classified. You need to have the proper qualifications to get the projects. So somebody gets a project, but they get the entire projects, but they implement only 30% of the project. They are obliged to subcontract 70% of the project to smaller companies. This is how sound competition develops. So we could do something like that in Greece as well. So instead of having monopolies, so you said that if a large company, if we tell the large company, okay, you're going to get the subsidy, you're going to get the loans, but this money will be channeled to Greek companies, Greek smaller companies, then that would be meaningful. But if the money goes elsewhere, then there's no point. And one final comment from Mr. Karathanasopoulos, because the same question stands for commerce. We say, you know, they are closing businesses. Let me stick to the sound businesses and not throw away the money out of the window. That's their argument. Anyway, after the memoranda, we see that there are various problems. We see that many small businesses are fading away from the market. And let me pick up what Mr. Adonis said. Retail trade, because often retail trade is considered a non-productive process and it's not financed. No, it is quite a productive process, because in my shelf I help Mr. Avanis determine his production. So let's also be critical of myself that we've made many mistakes during the period when we had the cheaper markets from China invading the situation. We should have reacted then to help Greek products survive. Especially GSEVEE has done quite a lot of effort and various movements regarding preservation of Greek production. And I repeat that consumers are key in all these efforts. I would like to come back to the economic democracy and to the tax issue that Yorgos Kavathas mentioned. Listen, for me, I believe there is a special charge. There's a special charge that is being imposed to every professional, and I don't understand why. I pay my taxes normally. I pay my taxes, my econ taxes. So we are moving ahead with a digital transformation. Why is the special charge still in place? And if they want to punish somebody who will believe that they are evading, why am I suffering this? Or is there a lack of respect towards us and towards taxpayers? And some more things that when we talk about economic democracy, we refer to the entire spectrum, not only financing. All my colleagues know that in our sector there is no tax-free amount. We are being taxed for our entire income. There are other categories that have a certain tax-free income. But why is that? We are offering to help the machine work. So instead of protecting us as much as possible, and when we are down, they should find a way to keep us afloat. They are constantly trying to hit us when we're down. And I believe that there is a completely unfair treatment. This was introduced as an extra charge in 2012. This doesn't exist anywhere in Europe, anywhere in the world. And this is just a charge to just professional people. And if I have 3 branches, I pay this charge 3 times. So they found a permanent, very easy way of charging us. We are very good at supplying the state, at paying the state, but the state does not return to us what we are due. We need to join forces. We need to believe in us. We need to join our forces. I don't think I'm small. I don't think we are small. I draw strength from my colleagues, and I believe that united we are stronger. We can convince the Greek society in order to turn the situation around and see a growth in our country, see the growth that the country deserves. And historically, if we see that there was great commerce throughout the country, everywhere, all the time. It's good to see the great achievements of tourism, and these are very important. And tourism also has helped retail as well. So, and sometimes we're hiding behind that, as we need to take a look at the how this truly operates, and we need to work together in order to have an actual true good results. There is nothing to be envious of. We are flexible, we are agile. Retail can be there and follow all the rules. And there are many people, other people, who do not follow the rules. And there is profiteering in the market. We know who is profiteering in the market, but we know how to call them out. The state can call them out and safeguard the market, and that's the job of the state, to protect all of us from all those who are profiteering, and not just sit idly by and do nothing about the profiteers. That's our complaint from the state, and the state must focus, combat all these problems, and it needs to take up to admit its responsibility.
So, our session has come to an end. Let me wish everybody that, SMEs will continue to exist in our country forever and ever, and let me wish patience to all of you and strength. Thank you very, very much.